committees. Tonight we're doing things slightly out of order. We're going to go with the Environment and Parks Committee first because there's going to be a Parks Plan presentation. Although that item is not before us in legislation tonight, the administration thought it appropriate to give us some advance understanding of that plan, give us time to think about it before it's actually introduced into legislation. So chairing the Environment and Parks Committee is Mr. Brandenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Yergin. Mr. DeVitas, Mr. France, and I are all present this evening. We don't have any items of legislative business. However, we will meet to receive a presentation from the administration on the Parks Master Plan. So it's my understanding that we'll also have a brief Q&A session right after the presentation where we can ask questions about what we see tonight. I also want to mention that we've been provided with a preliminary draft of the Parks Master Plan due to its length. I think with exhibits and appendices, it's around 500 pages. So we as a committee decided while it's in draft, we're not going to ask questions about the plan itself, just about the presentation, and then we'll ask additional questions at our next meeting and meetings following as soon as it's introduced. So now I'm going to turn the floor over to our Service Director, Ms. Wax-Carr, to introduce Brandstetter Carroll.
Thank you. Yes, with us tonight is Pat Hoagland. I think you can see him on the screen. Thanks, Pat, for waving. He is going to lead us through a presentation tonight on the Parks Master Plan. And I do think he has a couple other staff members that might be with us as well, but I think Pat is going to take the lead. And then we will have some time. His presentation is going to take about 20 minutes or so, and then we will have some time for some questions and answers. In addition, for the public, just so you know, the link that was referred to has been placed on our website. So at any time, the public can take a look at the actual plan that was referred to, and if they have questions, obviously, those are things we'd like to hear as well. So that will be available. The Park Board will be re-looking at the plan again on March 3rd at their next meeting, and then after that, we'll be putting in legislation, hopefully, for the adoption of the plan. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Pat Hoagland with Brandstetter Carroll, and I'm the project manager on the project. With me tonight also are Keith Rodenhauser and Hannah Krebs, who both worked quite a bit. They were the two that went out and looked at all your parks and talked to people in the parks. I'm going to go through the presentation, and then there will be options for questions and answers at the end of that. So hopefully we can share the screen. So do you see that screen on the PowerPoint?
Yes, Pat.
Okay, thank you. So why did this plan matter? One, we ensure that the division's alignment with the community and what people want to have in the community. Otherwise, the only thing that you know as elected officials are those people that come to council meetings and talk to you. So this is a chance for everybody to have their say. We want to strengthen the fiscal responsibility and sustainability of your Parks and Recreation system, looking at the cost of the services and how you use the income tax funds, and also prepare for future development and changes. We'll be looking at some opportunities for Aris and rail. You've got some changes at Raintree, the extension area at Bettler Park. We'll also have recommendations, not just for capital improvements, but for your internal operations. And then overall addressing connectivity throughout Green, and that's something that people told us loud and clear that they wanted, was more trails, more connectivity, and more types of activities that bring the community together. This was a 4-stage process. We started the evaluate stage early last year, and then we're about to start the engage phase. The surveys had already been sent out, but we're about to do public meetings when COVID hit. So that's when we had to step back and do some different methods, and actually came and talked to people in the parks because people were out taking advantage of the nice weather. And then from that, we worked with the steering committee to develop a vision for the future, and then the plan that you'll see, the recommendations and concepts here tonight. A few things about what some of the data says. You've got about 30, we have ranked the service level of all your parks as an example. and noted that about 35% of the population lives in the medium, low to low service areas. And that means that there weren't parks or facilities within a 10-minute walk or 5-minute drive. Only 12% of the population is within a 10-minute walking distance of a park. And that's actually pretty low, but you're a pretty spread out community. 69% are within a 5-minute drive. We had a statistically valid mail survey that went out, and 88% of the people that responded have visited one of your parks in the last year. A couple other things about your population, your poverty levels going up, and your aging of your population, which is going on everywhere. So you've got more 65-plus-year-olds. And then by 2024, you'll have more 65-plus-year-olds than you have children under 18. Another aspect of the finances of your parks and recreation is that your cost recovery for your programs and activities is lower than a comparison of several other communities. It's only 6% in green versus 45% of the benchmark that we looked at. And that's because you charge low fees for your programs, and that's a choice. And you don't have rec centers and aquatic centers and those kind of things that generate a lot of income. And then in terms of looking at your sites, as we went out and looked at all of them in detail, we looked at the wayfinding. Connectivity is needed, and there's some ADA deficiencies, that's handicap accessibility deficiencies at some of your parks as well that we noted. So this is a map showing the areas that are within a 10-minute walk to a park. Those areas in green are the 10-minute walk to a neighborhood park, and then the sort of brownish color 10-minute walk to some of your other parks. The schools are in blue, and the orange is your other park agencies. So you can see that a lot of the population is not within a 10-minute walk because your community is pretty spread out. And we looked at community park service areas and looked at a 5-minute drive, and those are your larger parks. So a lot of your population, as I said before, 69% is within a 5-minute drive of one of those parks. And also the orange shows the metro parks. So you got pretty well covered, other than up in the northeast. There's a big gap there. Obviously, the airport don't need service there. And then we did a composite of all the different types of recreation activities and facilities in the community. You know, the ball fields and soccer fields and playgrounds and shelters, those types of things. In this area, the more red it is, the less service there is. So again, you get up into that northeast, there's very few facilities and little access to facilities. And then down in some of the southwest area, you also see a lot of the orange and red. And then areas in between, the blue areas, hit the button. The blue areas are served by, are better served by facilities because those are closer to parks. So that's just one of the methods. Again, we did a lot of engagement with the community, did 2 days of in-park interviews. In September, we had 101 people engaged in 56 different interviews. We had a statistically valid mail survey that went out to about 2,000 homes. And we wanted to get at least 400, and we reached that goal pretty quickly because people were at home and filling out the surveys quickly. We had a Mind Mixer online engagement site and had 552 interactions, and 118 people, or 62 people identified 118 ideas. There was over 1,000 people on the web and handout surveys, and almost all of those were green residents, but some others that use your facilities responded. And then we had 20 different stakeholder groups that we talked to about more specifics of their organization and what their needs were. And that was a picture of Hannah talking to one of your residents. So what the community told us they wanted in terms of programs, health and wellness activities were very important. Those nature-based classes and experiences were very important. And then concert and performances that bring the community together, and outdoor movies, those kind of things are what people really wanted. In terms of facilities, more trails or natural areas, nature parks, and then paved bike paths. And then in terms of your overall system, the connectivity, better accessibility to your parks, better restrooms in your parks, and you've got better restrooms than most communities we've worked in. And then more lighting and security so people feel safer in the parks. Well, from all that, and this is a quick summary of hundreds of pages of the report, we came up and worked with the steering committee on a series of exercises to come up with a a vision, mission, and goals for the community. So the vision is quality parks and programs that connect and inspire. And your mission, and that's what you do and what you are connecting community through quality parks and programs. Then we came up with 5 goal areas, and these are sort of the buckets that all the recommendations are in. So number 1 was community connectivity, both in terms of the physical connections, social connections. Second was sustainability, both inside and out. So the quality of service, the practices that you provide. Excellent parks and facilities are number 3. So you can improve the lives by having great facilities for people. Improved health and wellness, having those opportunities and the challenges for people to become more healthy. And then industry-leading innovation. So making sure that you're on the cutting edge of what kind of programs and activities people are experiencing in green. And from this, we came up with the committee came up with a series of values. And the saying is rich in excellence. So responsibility, innovation, connectivity, health, and excellence are those sort of values that should guide everything that you do in terms of all your planning and programming. So there are 2 slides of just some broad recommendations. One was maintain the capital funding that you have now through the income tax. Establish a Green Parks Foundation to help in raising funds for parks, but also as a volunteer coordination organization and be able to supplement what the city can do in terms of funding for your parks. Look at some cost recovery standards, looking at standardizing some of your fees and looking at that fee structure. I think you keep your fees really low. One of our philosophies has been that you should set your fees at a rate that 80% of the people can afford, and then the other 20% you find ways through the foundation to fund through scholarships. And then setting up some maintenance standards so that as you add new parks and facilities, you'll add the staff that you need to keep them at the proper level of maintenance and keep them lasting for a long time. You should perform an ADA accessibility assessment of not just your facilities, but your programs and communications as well. So how do you reach out to the community? And then improving connectivity. That's one thing we heard throughout the entire process was people wanted more linkages to the parks, being able to go from their neighborhood to the parks to the schools, and then the wayfinding signage to help you get to those places. And that goes right into the trail linkages, again, both inside the parks and connecting the parks. Then adding some of those support features that make the experience in your parks better, such as sidewalks, shade structures, bottle fillers, and those types of things. There was a lot of discussion about permitting leashed dogs at some additional parks and facilities, and we've considered that, especially at Arias and Creekbaum, but not at Bettler. It's been the policy there not to have even to allow dogs on leash. And then adding picnic shelters at some of your existing and the future parks, so more opportunities for those outdoor gatherings. And then look at opportunities for new parkland and expanding the bases of the existing parkland that you have so you can fill some of those gaps, and plus with the growth that you'll be seeing in the future. Add lighting at the athletic fields, and then therefore you're updating some of the hours. And a couple of the options there are at East Liberty and at Spring Hill Sports Complex for adding some lighting to get more use out of those fields. Development of an outdoor education venue and nature center, and Southgate Park is one possibility, and that could be operated in conjunction with Metro Parks or the state parks and Fish and Wildlife and other partner organizations. So that's something that people said they wanted more access to nature. So it's one way that it's not necessarily your area of expertise to be naturalists, but you can get those services somewhere else. You've started a brand through Parker, and he's a cute figure. We've used him throughout the presentation here a lot, but building on things like the Parker Trail Challenge that you did last fall, and let that be your consistent thing. So when people see Parker, they know this is a green parks and recreation activity. And then establish those partnerships to cross-promote the programming. It's not just program that you do, but other organizations as well. Increase your capacity to host events and intergenerational offerings, those things like summer concerts and movies, Again, those activities that bring the community together, and they'll make those connections. But you've got to also have the staff, and they have to be professionally trained to be able to operate all this system. Look at a feasibility study to explore an indoor sports complex to fill some of the need for year-round indoor activities, and also looking at the opportunities to partnership for the development of an outdoor aquatic center. It's something that the city has sort of indicated that that's something they don't really want to get into that business, but if they could possibly partner to where they would maybe provide the land for a private operator to develop and provide an outdoor aquatic center in the community, because a lot of people said that's something they'd like to see. We've got a few concepts here. Just the idea of these concepts are to show the types of things that could go on these sites, what would fit, what would be appropriate, not necessarily go out and build these right away. They all need to be discussed with the neighbors around the parks and those that would be using them. So at Kleckner Park, this is the bus parking area. The second ball field was added recently, but you should have some paved areas in between to provide access, because even the coach could be in a wheelchair and has to have access to those fields. Upgrading the parking lot and adding more parking as well. And then adding facilities like a half basketball court, a playground, restroom, picnic shelter. And then there's a paved area that wouldn't be used anymore, and that could become an open play field. That's just one option or what could be developed there. I think that's something that will be studied more here in the near future. At Kriegbong Park, there's existing ball fields that are there in about a 41-car parking lot. We're saying that you should expand, almost double the size of that parking lot, add a half basketball court, playground, picnic shelter, restrooms, and then in the area, in the wooded area, add a paved trail around the perimeter of that, and then also a walking, a nature type trail on the inside of that, and then a BMX or pump track where you ride a bike where it sort of goes up and down, follows the path. And then all the paved areas in between to connect those facilities. At Eris, right now you've got the football and lacrosse fields in the center with a gravel parking lot. So we're saying you should enhance those with the walkways going to each of those fields, again, so that your spectators in wheelchairs or have other disabilities can get to those facilities. We're expanding some additional football fields and basically taking all the football fields and putting them at one location, paving the parking lots and the roads, adding a nature play area, picnic shelter, and a fitness equipment area in the area in the middle of the park. You've got the existing dog park there now. We've got about a nature trail in the brown here. It's about a 0.8 mile natural path. And then down this far end, I've got another 0.4 of a mile paved loop with an archery range and a picnic shelter and a small parking lot. And then beyond that, a half-mile area, natural trail around the wetland area. So you've got quite a few new improvements going on at this park, some of it having minor impact on some of the wooded area. And then we've taken the rectangular fields out of Greensburg Park and moved those to Eris. So that frees up room for another large baseball diamond that there's a demand for in that area with the bleachers, shelter in that area. Expanded the parking area with another 85 spaces. And then also made some improvements. There was an existing picnic shelter, but expanding the playground, adding some fitness equipment. Then you'll see a walking trail around the perimeter. Now, this isn't going to be easy to do because there's some topography challenges in the area, but it's something that would, if it could be worked out and studied in more detail, something that would really enhance the park. And we've also, you'll see that the pavement areas to connect the various facilities as well. Then at Rail Park, there's an existing roadway in, it's also a driveway into the park. More natural setting for this park with a nature play area, a vault-style restroom, picnic shelter, a butterfly garden, some bird blinds around a trail. The gray is a paved trail, community garden area. And then around the wetland area, providing a wetland boardwalk into that area for nature study and interpretation, and then an access to the neighborhoods, both north and east of the site. Quite a bit there going on. Those are just to show some of the examples. And at the end of the plan, there's an action plan, and there's about 150 different strategies. We've categorized those by, you see at the upper right here, by 0 to 2 years, 3 to 5, 6 to 10, the category of the type of improvement, who's responsible for it, and the agency, and then the funding source. So it's not all, most of these on this page are all the capital improvement plan, but there's others in there as well. So with that, I will turn off the PowerPoint and see if there's any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Hoagland.
Sure.
I have just a couple of questions I'd like to ask, and then I'll open it up to committee and then to council.
Okay.
So first one, so Ms. Carr mentioned that the plan is now on the website. I was just wondering, so what I received a couple weeks ago was pretty clearly marked draft. Has the plan been finalized, or will it be finalized after the park board meeting?
After the park board meeting, the park board recommended approving it, I believe, but it wouldn't be draft until it's accepted and approved by the park board and council. So it's, even if nothing changes, it's still a draft until then.
Okay, thank you. And then I was wondering, so I think you mentioned immediately after the mail-out survey began, then COVID set in, and we had a lot of dramatic changes. I noticed, for example, with the park intercepts, on weekends, September, our parks are typically pretty busy. But the number, right, was 56 intercepts, 101 individuals for those surveys. I was just wondering, overall, how do you feel, or the results, I guess, how confident are you in the results and the opinions with COVID and limited people getting out?
Right. Well, we advertised those meetings so that we would have anybody would have the opportunity to come and talk to us. You know, we weren't just going out there talking to the people that happened to be in the park that day. So there was some advance notice. So those people that wanted an opportunity to talk to us had opportunities through the Mind Mixer site, through meeting us on site. So there was other, and also filling out the surveys that were done. So I think we had 100 and some people. Typically you get about 30 people at most public meetings, sometimes more depending on the interest or if there's any controversy. But we feel, we would have loved to have had some public open houses, but it just wasn't feasible at the time.
Okay, thank you. And then I was wondering, so I know there was also a web survey done. I think about 1,100 responses were collected to the web survey. So you mentioned a couple times that the mail survey, I think you said 2,000 surveys were sent out, 400 received back. I'm just curious, so is the mail survey, or I'm sorry, not the mail, is the web survey a typical survey to follow the mail, being that the mail is the statistically valid survey?
Right, good question. They reach different audiences. Again, the mail survey was a random sample of households. Only one per household could be filled out, and we did put it up here. We have a map showing where those were located and the demographics that really match the demographics of the community really well. The web survey, though, could be filled out by anybody, and typically because you find out about it because you were involved in a program, or your soccer coach emailed you, sent an email blast out asking you to. It's a little skewed towards those people that use your parks on a regular basis, and that's a good thing. But whereas the mail survey, we also reach some people that don't use your parks and programs as much, and they're important to listen to as well. So we like to they're really two different types of things. We have similar questions. Like the mail survey is 5 pages, and the web survey is only about 2 pages when you print it out. So it's a shorter, more to the point type of survey. So it's a little bit different audience, and just another method of getting input, getting more people the opportunity to provide input.
Okay, thank you. And I think I had asked Ms. Carr to check on controls and comparability between the two. So with the web survey, I think it was indicated that it could be completed by multiple members of a household,
Yes.
multiple, same person
It could,
multiple
you
times,
could,
and so on.
yes, you could stuff the ballot box.
Yeah, you could.
In that one a little bit if you wanted to. We didn't see any evidence of that. Whereas the other survey, we asked people to answer for their household because, 5-year-olds aren't going to be filling out a 5-page survey. So every question pretty much said, has you or anyone in your family used a park in the last year, as an example. So you're reaching more than just the 400 people. It's the households that are represented there.
Okay, very good point, right? I wondered, were the results you received as far as unmet needs, were they pretty similar between the two, or
Yes.
did you see?
Yeah, they are little different percentages. You'll typically, because of the nature of the people that fill out the web survey, typically have a little higher response in demand for some of the sports facilities. But in general, the trails, connectivity, those activities that bring communities together, access to nature came to the top in both.
Okay, thank you. And then the last one, right, so alternative funding strategies. I think you mentioned that we charge in Green about 6% on average for program costs, other communities above 40%. So I was curious, right, we're very proactive as a community in securing grants, especially for our parks. I know at our last meeting, we approved a restroom type grant where the grant put forth 2/3 of the cost and the city would put forth 1/3 to create a public facility in an area where we don't have one now. So I was just curious, does your funding strategies, the proposed strategies, do they include grants? And what other types of charges would there be, right? Would it be program fees? And not meaning like a dance program, but like Twisted Wilderfest, would there be an admission charge proposed?
We didn't get into specifics of that, the Twisted Wilderfest, but we just said I think you need to look at the actual cost of the services that you're providing, and set your fee ranges based on what you actually spend. And that takes some effort on the city's part to document what those costs are. But if you've got to go out and drag and line ball fields and take care of the turf, you should know what that cost is so that you know what you should charge to leagues, or especially adult leagues. We always feel that the adults should pay their own way. You might subsidize more of the children's activities, but a fee structure or a pricing structure that things that are right in your mission, you might subsidize, whereas things that are a little further away from the mission, you might charge more for. You might look at charging resident or non-residents more. And one of the big differences, as I mentioned, in the cost recovery is you don't have those facilities like rec centers and aquatic centers that have a lot of fees. It's mainly just the programs that you have that you offer. And I think that people want more programs as well. But I think people are willing to pay for some of those, the fitness and wellness programs, boot camps and those kind of things. And you don't have an indoor facility to program, and that's another aspect of it. You're limited on the types of programs that you can offer because of not having an indoor facility.
Sure.
So that's why that number is lower than a lot of other communities that have those facilities.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hoagland. That's all the questions
Sure.
I have. So now open it up to committee. Mr. France, Mr. DeVitas, any questions?
I have no questions at this point.
No questions? Okay. Anybody on council have questions?
I do.
Ms. Babbitt?
I just have a couple questions. When you were talking about the needs that you or the underserved kind of portions of the community and where the needs were, you mentioned that the northeast quadrant of the city wasn't well served by parks and there really wasn't much up there. But then when you were talking about ideas for what we should be doing, I know you couldn't give us the whole plan, it's just a summary tonight. I didn't hear anything that specifically was directed at the northeast quadrant of the city. Is there anything in the plan as a whole that talks about increasing the park services or doing something park-wise up there?
Well, there's just not just there, but all over. We've got some additional facilities, as you saw in some of those, the concepts. Keith, you on here, if you want to respond to that? Keith Rodenhauser.
Yes, Pat, I'm here. So we did recommend looking into land in areas that are underserved if it becomes available. We didn't identify any specific properties. As far as that northeast quadrant, though, the improvements at Kriegbaum would do a lot to help services there. Residents might not be able to walk to that park, but they would be within a 5-minute drive.
But that was the idea, upgrading Creek Bomb was
That's
for
at
the
least part
northeast
of the idea,
quadrant?
yes.
Okay. Thank you. My other question is, when you listed out, I believe there were 5 goals, or were there 6? What fed the ranking of those goals?
Oh, there wasn't any ranking to those. They're just numbered. So
They're
there
just
wasn't-
numbered so that they
just-
can be separated? They're not prioritized?
Right, no, they're not, and that's the way that the action plan is geared around those. You'll notice that there's goal 1, objective 1, point 1, point 2, point 3, so it's just a way to number those, so there's no one that's any more important than the other.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, I have a quick question. The Raintree Golf and Event Center, is that included in the 6% fees, or is that something that wasn't considered because it is a public, owned by the city?
Pat, I can answer that. It is not
Yeah,
considered because it's operated by a third party.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council?
Mr. Chairman, you had spoken early on in the presentation about a statistically valid mail survey. For the uninitiated, what does that mean? What makes it statistically valid?
That's a good question. Basically, you want to have enough surveys that if you were to perform this survey like 100 times, you'd get within a few percentage points of each of the answers. So you've got basically 400 households that are representative of the whole community, and then that's considered a good response. It sounds like a small number when you look at the whole total number of households, but the fact that it's a random sample of residents, so you've got users and non-users in there. We have locations or approximate locations for each of those residents, so we can make sure that every part of the community is represented. So that's what makes it statistically valid.
And was there an effort to represent all the demographic age groups?
Yeah, we
different-
didn't put that into the slide, but there is in the questions in the survey, then also in the other presentation in the graphics, and then the report shows breakdown of the families with 0 to 5-year-olds, 6 to 9, 10 to 14, whatever, all different age groups, and you're within about 2 percentage points of every one of those categories. So that makes you feel that you've got a good representation of people throughout the community. It's not just a bunch of older people at home that have time at home filling out the surveys. It was a pretty well represented group.
Thank you. I'm sure there'll be more questions that we'll all have
Right.
when you're back.
Yeah, I think once the plan is finalized and Parks Board has had a chance to weigh in, then, yeah, we'll certainly have more questions about it. So, well, thank you, Mr. Hoagland. Thank you, Ms. Wackcar, for bringing Brandstetter Carroll this evening.
I'd also like to thank our steering committee. Our steering committee spent a lot of time, sometimes remote, sometimes through email because of the COVID situation, but they spent a lot of time, and their work's not over yet, so we want to keep them engaged. Thanks.
And we'd like to thank Valerie and Michael Elkins and Wayne Weethy have been working with us real closely throughout the entire process, and they've been great to work with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, we don't have any other items of legislation to discuss this evening. Is there any items of new or old business come before Environment and Parks?
No.
Hearing none, we are adjourned.